Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Matt Costin.
And I'm James Bland.
And we're here today from BVA BDRC to bring you points of view, direct from the consumers.
This summer, one of the conference organisers, the one at the back there telling everyone what to do, asked us to recruit some real hotel guests in order to find out from the horse's mouths what really matters to them when it comes to hotels, their likes, their dislikes, and what they'd ask hoteliers if they had the chance. They wanted a dynamic session, not just another presentation.
Sounds good, we said. We're a consumer insights agency specialising in hotels. It's very much part of what we do.
And they said they'd provide a top-class panel to respond live to the insights.
Great, we said. Who'll be on it?
Tim Walton from Marriott, Serena von der Heide from the Georgian House Hotel, Rob Patterson from Best Western, and Nicholas Northam from Interstate.
Perfect, we said. They'll be brilliant. A global giant, an independent hotel, a consortium, and a management company. Is anything off limits, we asked?
No, and they said, whatever matters to guests should matter to them. So whatever the travellers ask can be put directly to the panel.
Right.
Well, what's wrong with that, they asked.
Well, it's just that when you ask guests what they want, sometimes they can get fairly literal and ask something like,
why don't you provide kettles and fridges to make everyone's enjoyment much better?
Or they can go the other way and just get a bit too general.
Give us better prices and treat us better.
We see, they said. So what would you suggest instead?
Well, we love speaking to consumers, but let us edit out the bland and make sure we serve up the interesting stuff, if you'll forgive the pun, James.
Just about. We don't want another presentation. They said we want to hear from real guests.
You will, we said. Don't worry. We will not show a single slide, and this session will be completely different from what's been done here before.
Although some of the topics, no doubt, will be familiar. And the Slido app remains open for questions from the floor.
Indeed, and we'll start with everyone's favourite topic, the path to purchase. How do guests want to book their rooms?
I'm sure there are some people who still book bedrooms over the phone. Actually, I know from our data that they exist, but the path to purchase has become incredibly fragmented and varied.
When I book hotels, I use booking.com.
I always book directly through the hotelier's website.
I have a tendency to book online simply because it's easier. You know, if I have a query and if I can get that answered quite quickly, and then I am more inclined to book that hotel.
When I go away, I tend to book online exclusively. We don't tend to go into agencies or high street shops. It's usually the online searching, online comparisons that are done. We'll use a lot of the online comparison websites to find different hotels, different sort of packages that might be workable.
Normally, I tend to book hotels online, and if I book them online, I normally call them up to check everything's okay as well.
Often, yeah, I'll go through like online travels like EasyJet or Thompson or something like that.
And the reasons why the path to purchase has become so fragmented are also many and varied.
I think it's the cheaper, where you can find the cheapest hotel rooms.
So I may do my research through a consolidator to see, like TripAdvisor I generally use, to get an idea of what range of hotels there are in the place, what other people think about them.
I tend to book either sometimes directly with the hotel, because sometimes the hotel are offering the best price, and sometimes it's through someone like booking.com. I tend to use them an awful lot. So I will do a sort of price comparison.
When looking for prices, it's always really, really difficult because there are a million different websites offering a million different services, offering a million different prices. Sometimes for rooms that look like they're equivalent but aren't, sometimes for rooms that are genuinely equivalent. I think that pricing is something that's really, really difficult as a consumer or as a client to understand and to work out where the best deals can be found.
And therein lies part of the challenge. The hotel guest doesn't care what goes on behind the scenes or what partnerships and integrations may or may not be in place. They just want to book with the minimum of fuss.
What would be really fantastic is if a customer could call either the hotel manager or someone at the actual hotel directly and just ask them what the best price was without having all of the added complication of these other places. I don't know why hotels don't offer on their websites more of that service.
And customers don't just want to be dumped in any old room. Increasingly, they now expect either a bit of control or a bit of thought to have gone into it. And it's of little concern to them that your PMS may not speak to your GDS, your CRM, or your OTA.
I think hotels should think more about families. You can just book a room, but you have to think also that if you book 2 rooms, they must be together. If you want to go to the other room during the night or you have some problem, you just have to walk a few meters, not some minutes.
A good hotel experience would be, I guess, the all-around experience, really, the all-around benefit. I mean, backpacking has its perks. Working within a budget is good too, but I guess the transparency from the part of the hotel to know, for the client to know what to expect from that, from their services, would be perhaps one of the best takeaways from a hotel experience.
If I would ask other hoteliers why they don't do that, because it's such an easy thing to do to let you have the choice of your room.
And so, our first question to the panel is...
What can you do to make me book a room with you instead of looking in booking.com?
So, Nicholas, please can we come to you first. What can you do within the frameworks you operate to encourage direct booking? Indeed, do you even actually want to?
Yeah, I mean, it's the classic question that's occupying so many minds all of the time at this moment in time. And the advantage we have is obviously we work across lots of different brands, being a management company. So we see how the different brands, and indeed we operate independent hotels as well. So we do see it right the way across the spectrum. And I think in terms of one of the ways that the hotel brands can really get people to book direct is through the apps. And the apps that the hotel companies have created. I think that's a real positive because it does take the consumer right from booking all the way through digital key, through to checkout. So I think the app is a critical point, and with that you drive loyalty and you build loyalty and you get that customer loyal to you as opposed to booking.com. Now, booking.com has its place, and I think it's up to us as hoteliers to work with the OTAs, booking.com being the obvious one, because there is a time and a place when we do want that business. But I think one of the other key messages that's really important for the brands to get across is price, because the natural assumption of the consumer is that you can get a room cheaper through booking.com than you can through Marriott.com, for instance. And I think that's a real key message that actually as brands and hotels, we've not got across to the consumer.
And how about the cost of sale? Is it broadly comparable, OTA versus the brand.com website?
No. Generally, it is perceived that it is cheaper to book directly through the brand. But actually, there are channels where it is pretty comparable to book through the OTAs, which is why we don't automatically just say no, we don't want them and turn them off. And indeed, the independent hotels that we operate, we're very keen to work with the OTAs, but we will do things, so for example, in one of the particular hotels that we operate, we won't put the top-end inventory through booking.com, so we keep that booked direct. But there is certainly a place for those channels.
Tim, can we come to you? What can Marriott and its various brands do to encourage more direct booking and to make it more appealing to the owners and managers?
Yeah, I mean, I would actually agree with Nick. I mean, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact there is a place for the intermediaries, for the booking.coms of this world. You know, and candidly, they allow us to access guests that our own channels just don't reach. So on the one hand, we work in competition with these intermediaries, but on the other hand, you know, we work very closely with them. I think when it comes to encouraging people to book direct, clearly what we try to do is encourage people through our breadth of brand estate. As you know, we're 31 brands today that you can book through the single platform. The depth of content on our proprietary websites is clearly a lot deeper than you would expect to find amongst the intermediaries, so that's a consideration. I think the biggest consideration, and Nick mentioned it, it's loyalty. So, you know, we're 110 million members, I think, loyalty members today. If our loyalty membership was a country, we would be 10th or 12th in terms of population size in the world, and it drives 50% of all our room nights across the estate. So it's a very valuable tool to us in terms of driving people to our proprietary websites. Members can only collect points if they book through the websites. It's not possible to do so through the intermediaries. And, you know, as well as points, there are other benefits. Nick mentioned the app. You know, the app is, for members, they can benefit from specific member rates. They can benefit from remote check-in. They can benefit from access to their rooms via their mobile phones, and a whole suite of other benefits that comes through the app. So I think it's a very long-winded way of saying that for us, the main way in which we're able to drive people to our proprietary sites is through the loyalty scheme.
Thank you. Rob, representing brands that are slightly different, do you have a different view at all?
Yeah, I would question, and I wonder, just because somebody has a loyalty card and Best Western has a rewards program, does that mean they're loyal to your brand? And I don't think that's the case today. I think people have loyalty cards and collect points, but they'll use multiple brands. And depending on their trip, they'll use multiple segments. So they'll use leisure, luxury, right through to economy, depending on the type of trip. So for me, I think on this question, people can get a little bit hung up on driving the business direct. And actually, when you work it out, I think Nicholas alluded to it before, that the cost of sale on the direct channel can actually, after you start layering rewards points and cost of websites and the cost of hosting and the cost of advertising direct campaigns and the millions that go into it, it actually turns out that the end hotel is paying higher fees for a direct booking than it is through an OTA. So I think we've got to kind of think about this carefully and say, you know, are we in this for profit? Are we in this for, what are we trying to do? Is it a vanity project to drive direct? I'm not sure.
So how do we keep the brand attractive if it costs more to acquire a room that way?
I absolutely would agree. I think brands need to look at their proposition and value today in a different way than what they did, let's say, 10 years ago. I think if you cast back 10 years ago and think about how a customer was choosing a brand, the brand played a big role in that because it played that trust that I know what I'm going to get. I know what I'm going to get when I turn up, and I feel confident that it's going to be something that I'm used to or I'm consistent with. But reality is today that people can go on TripAdvisor, and this is where the independent, and perhaps you have a view on this one as well, but this is where the independent, I think, is in a great position, because when you go onto TripAdvisor, the trust now comes from other customers and 4,000 people saying, actually, this is a really cool hotel. And the brand plays less of a role. So I think there's a really cool time for a rising of independence right now, and I think I'm interested to hear your view on that one, but as an independent.
As am I. Serena?
I think you're absolutely right about that. But the gentleman there was raising the subject of prices, and across Europe, anti-parity clauses have been banned, but not here in the UK. And I think we've taken a weaker stance, and that has resulted in a lot of hoteliers not really knowing where they stand. And I think that it's to the detriment of the client that we haven't got, as they have in the rest of Europe, the same opportunity to offer a range of prices to our customers.
Okay, it's clearly causing some confusion. We've got about a minute left in this segment. Can we have a quick look and see if there are any questions on Slido that we might want to put to the panel? Have we had any yet? Okay, do you think that hotels should try and compete with offers such as Hotels.com offering 10th night free? Would anyone like to chip into that one?
Well, I guess they do, or we do. I mean, not in quite as crude and simplistic, stay 9, get your 10th free as you do with your Cafe Nero stamp or your Starbucks app or whatever. But I think that really is exactly what we do. I mean, as ever, it comes down to the amount of points you earn is dependent on how much money you've spent. So you could argue, you know, when you go into a Nero, whether you'll get a flat white or a venti, no, a Stark, anyway, the big one, you know. Cappuccino, you actually get the same number of points. So Potentially, you could go irrespective of how much money you spend, you get your 10th night free.
I was going to say, in the age of instant gratification, there is appeal to a very simple program. Are the hotel programs simple enough?
But I think, certainly speaking on behalf of Marriott, our programs have changed. So it used to be redeemed against free nights. I think you're right, James. The requirements of the marketplace have changed. So now you can redeem against a range of experiences. You can redeem against, backstage passes at a concert, or amazing seats at a sporting event. And I think we will see the range of a flexibility of ability to be able to redeem points increase even further in the future.
Right, I'm going to move the conversation on, just conscious of the time. Occasionally, we do hear some commentators, mistakenly in my view, saying that brand is dead. Don't just take the latest brand margin data and my word for it, though. Some of these travelers, at least, still see a place for a brand in their lives, even if some of them do not.
I don't have a preferred brand of hotel because when I travel, I look for the price and not for the hotel name brand.
Independent hotels, there's such a variation on independent hotels. They're not my favourite because quite often there's no consistency, and it's only when you get there you find out what the offering is. It can be good, sometimes it's bad.
Probably the independents are worse than some of the brands actually, because the quality can be so inconsistent. In fact, my pet hate is little boutique hotels who think they're extra special, and actually the room's like a closet and there's nothing in there and you're paying a fortune, and just to be in somewhere that looks like it's stylish, but it's a sort of a triumph of style over substance.
My favorite hotel brand is Hyatt, and that's mostly based off of my last experience at a hotel. It was just such a great experience. The service was outstanding.
Well, in the UK, I might stay in these sort of branded, these country house hotels, but I've always found the experience somewhat disappointing. It never quite works out as well as it looks on the brochure.
Well, I'm a member of Hilton Honors, and Hilton, they have all different brands within the group, and in a way they're quite old-fashioned, the rooms, but one thing that's good about them is they're consistent. If you stay in a Hilton hotel, you know exactly what toiletries you're going to get, you know exactly how things are laid out, and that's good. It's really useful.
I think one of the better sort of chain hotels I stayed in was Best Western. And what I liked about them, although we felt the room might have been a bit small we were in, at least it was clean, it was tidy. We felt they were a little bit mean with the sort of tea and biscuits, but when we did ask them for extra things, they happily gave it to us. And what I also found really useful is their staff were really helpful.
My favourite brand of hotels are mainly cheaper UK hotels. For instance, the Premier Inn, because you know the layout of the room, you know what you're going to get, and it's always very clean and comfortable.
So, Rob, a little less tight with the tea and biscuits, perhaps. Clearly what underpins this, it's a word that came up in the last discussion, is trust. In surveys, we rarely see brand in and of itself come out as a key decision driver, but elements that a brand represents and can convey with a simple logo or a name continue to perform well.
And with trust in mind, our next question goes first to Serena.
Want to know what could you do to make me trust you in the same way that I trust the bigger brands?
Well, I think that trust, or at least people believe most the word of others. So if it's a friend, if it's word of mouth, if it's personal experience, that's the most powerful tool. And so we have to look to our social media because that's, I think, plays a very important role. I think on our website and wherever we describe our service and our hotel, we have to be completely transparent. Gone are the days of having widening lenses on our photographs or wrongly describing things. If a room's small, we're quite right to describe those rooms as a shoebox or as tiny. But I don't think your sample is very rounded, and I would dispute that really today's traveller is really looking for trust. I think it was very important in the 70s and 80s before the internet when people were using guidebooks and they wanted to know something was consistent. And it's true that if you go to brand, you can predict what you're going to have, the room layout, the colours in the room, the toiletries, the fabrics, everything you can predict. But I'm not convinced. I think there's a part of travelling society today that finds that brand is bland, and they're looking for something more personal, more exciting, more beautiful, and they're willing to roll the dice to find something special.
Tim, brand is bland.
3.
Well, you know, I think historically there's been a case for that, and I think in many instances that has been the case. People want a less commoditized product now. People don't want to wake up in London, Rome, and Buenos Aires and be in exactly the same room with the same colors and the same amenities. I think the requirements of the market have moved on. However, what I would say is that, you know, based upon the interviews that you did, the requirements of the market vary. Some people want the more consistent approach of perhaps a budget hotel, and some people want the more experiential stay in perhaps an independent hotel. And we like to think that we're able to provide a solution for both, insofar as we have, you know, a brand like Moxy that would cater for the requirements of the guide looking for a more budget-orientated stay. But likewise, we have brands like Autograph Collection and the Luxury Collection and the Tribute Portfolio and Design Hotels that I think cater for a different audience and marry the benefits of the independent hotelier with the strength of a distribution system behind it that helps the owners to achieve certain levels of profitability and, frankly, provides that security blanket, if you like, to the consumer. So they're staying in an independent hotel, and in each situation, every one of those independent hotels by their nature will be different, but at the same time, they're safe in the knowledge that from a kind of security perspective and a design perspective, things will accord to a certain basic minimum standard. And I think, you know, the success of these brands that I've referenced they speak for themselves to an extent because of the terrific growth that we've seen within those estates.
Well, on that point, Rob, you spoke at the Hotel Tech Conference, and you said that the majority of applications to join Best Western are now with your softer brands, including brands from the core brand wanting to switch. Is that the future for Best Western?
I think we'd be naive if we tried to fight that, because that's a trend that the market's looking for. So for me, I kind of look at it and go, well, if people want to be able to provide that non-homogenized, bland experience, but they want to be able to have that independent, local hotelier experience, and it's backed up by 2,000 or 3,000 reviews online that say this is a fantastic place, then the element of trust comes from the other people and the word of mouth. And if that's a consumer trend that we're seeing, then investors will follow. And a lot of hotel owners are saying, you know what, we want the flexibility to create a really local, cool experience. And the Best Western Soft Brands offers that. It says you can keep your hotel name, you don't have to hang our sign on your front door, and you can provide a really cool experience, but you're backed up by a rewards program that has millions and millions and millions of customers around the world. You'll get points. So I think you've got the balance of both with the soft brand solution in Best Western.
Nicholas, from the manager's perspective.
I think, yeah, we operate both. So we operate independent and we operate branded hotels. I think Serena's absolutely right. I think the days of people not trusting are less and less. I think you just have to look at the whole sharing economy and Airbnb and facilities such as that. People are prepared to take more of a risk, more of a chance. Clearly the internet and consumer websites have opened up and really sort of nailed the trust issue, because you can see it's there. So in a way that goes away, and I think people are more prepared to trial and see, well, actually, I'm not going to stay in that particular hotel. I will give that a go. You're always going to get let down once in a while, but generally I think that there is a real space for it.
Well, that's a perfect setup for the next topic, which is Airbnb. Airbnb is no longer a challenger. That's not to say it's not still a challenge. It is now well and truly established in the consideration set of travelers.
It's a simple apartment, really nice host, and it provided a room, a kitchen, it just felt like a home. So that is the first impression I had with Airbnb, that you could go to some place away or even have a staycation, as we call it, and still feel like you're at home.
Mainly the ability to have the flexibility to cook and to hang out in the living room because we've got 2 kids.
We are more and more cost conscious, so we are looking for value for money, which we can do more easily on these price comparison websites, and also with the establishment of these online services like Airbnb, more and more private individuals can rent out their homes quicker and easier, which means that this drives competition, and thus hotels are overpriced and thus do not get the amount of punters through the door. Punters, I mean customers.
Airbnb does seem to have slightly greater appeal to younger consumers, but it's not exclusive. BVA BDRC data shows that it is used right across the generational spectrum, and it's stolen market share from hotels in every tier of the market. I will admit to being an Airbnb advocate myself, but there are still some people who think that they're
pirates, playing fast and loose with our safety and offering a product that is generally inferior.
Well, I don't use Airbnb because I can afford not to. I enjoy going to hotels with a degree of what's the word? Where I'm looking for a hotel which can offer me an experience and a very good position within a city centre. My kids aren't as fortunate, they're younger, so they would use Airbnb because it's cheaper and the convenience and the lack of service is less of an issue for them.
Is Airbnb, I did kind of look into going into Airbnbs. Part of the things that again put me off of Airbnbs, the fact that you can't measure the consistency. I did look at going into a few local ones, but what I found that there was a real discrepancy in standards and what the actual owners wanted. And when I read some of the comments, the fact one of them, he said, if you want to contact me, do it by email. Even if I'm on the premises, do not approach me. So I thought that was a definite no-no.
Well, I prefer staying in hotels. I don't like Airbnb and things like that because I like anonymity. So I like to stay in something that's not got someone else's stamp on it. I don't like to have to deal with people and arrange meetings to hand over keys and things. With a hotel, I can get there any time of day or night. I can get in, I'm greeted, I go to my room. If I need something, I ring somebody. It's hassle-free.
So there you have it. Reassuringly for those people in this room, there are still some people who have not been swept up in Airbnb mania. I rather suspect James may be among them. Hard to believe he's technically a millennial. Yeah. The serious point, though, is that the value proposition of hotels is being more widely questioned as a result of consumers being more widely exposed to Airbnb and other homestay brands.
I would like to ask them how they can make hotels feel more homely and give the customer more for what they're paying. How are they going to do that in the future?
Not too big a question. Tim, let's start with you.
Where to start? Well, I think it was probably Joe that said this morning that there is room in the market for all of us. The questioner did say, why can't you make your hotels more homely? I think it's a fair point, and it's probably back to Serena's earlier point. Nobody wants a bland, commoditized product anymore in terms of hotel, wherever they're sitting in terms of the quality food chain. So I think there's room for everybody, and I think it's fair to say that hotel products are moving on as a consequence of what's been said. That said, we recognize the growth of the sector, and as you'll be aware, we moved into the sector in April of this year when we announced a pilot project with Hostmaker on a brand called Tribute Portfolio Homes. And that is a curated collection of 200 properties in London. In fact, was extended this week, the pilot scheme, to Paris, Rome, and Lisbon. And again, to the point of one of the ladies that spoke, it's a more full-service experience than you might expect to receive from most of the home share sector, insofar as you will be checked in. There's 24-hour, 7-day-a-week service if you require it. And I think from a product consistency perspective, it's a lot more consistent than you might find within some of the sector.
So it's not so much hotels becoming more homely, homes becoming more hotel-y.
I think that's right, and it's blurring in the middle, and likewise the market. And to be honest, it's too early for us to be able to tell the extent to which it is affecting our base business. What we do know is that broadly 3/4 of the people staying are staying on leisure, and they're staying as parts of small groups, normally kind of friends and family. And the average length of stay is roughly double what we've seen across our London hotel estate. So yes, we see an opportunity in this marketplace, but as I say, we feel that there is room for both hotels and the home share market as well.
And is the rollout of the Tribute portfolio a tacit acceptance, really, that traditional brands like Marriott are going to struggle to compete on that homeliness dimension?
I think, brands are dynamic, so brands need to evolve, and I think, we're putting considerable investment as a company now behind both the Marriott and, in fact, the Sheraton brand, because there's an argument to say that perhaps they have become outdated in some cases. And all brands eventually become obsolete, so it's incumbent upon us to ensure that that doesn't happen.
Serena, how much of an impact does Airbnb have on your property?
Airbnb has had a big impact on the demand in our area because there are so many professionally listed properties. And I think that the customer is wooed by the idea they're going to pay less, get more space, get more facilities. And we have to listen to that and understand the facilities that they want. But part of the reason they can pay less is because Airbnb hosts aren't having to pay the things that we have to pay, like business rates and all the sort of safety stuff and all that. So that isn't fair in the first place. And I think that Airbnb have been extremely clever because they have traded this idea that you're going to live like a local, which is a myth. The majority of hosts they're not hosting a room in their own house. You don't get to meet the host at all. It's professionally done. They're running a huge number of places. You meet somebody at an assigned place and they shove a key in your hand. And then in my case, I was in Bulgaria trying to order a taxi for 2:30 a.m., living life like a local, but unable to speak Bulgarian, unable to know the name or details for a taxi company in a residential area, miles from any taxi rank. So they've been very clever in giving this homely idea, but actually the customer really does need some of the support and those facilities and services that a hotel is offering.
Okay. Rob, what do your members say to you about the threat of Airbnb and the impact it has?
Yeah, not too dissimilar to what was just said here. It's definitely, I think, especially in cities like Edinburgh, there's a number of markets where there's just so much product coming online. It's become quite a big competitor. We had recently a whole block of apartments was built just for Airbnb. Now it's not going to be listed on STR. It's not going to be listed as a hotel, but it's a real competitor that sits on your doorstep. But what I find interesting about Airbnb is, whilst not too many of the respondents were big fans of Airbnb, millions of people around the world are. It's become an enormous platform with huge coverage and a household name in a very short space of time. And what that tells me is that people are looking for a bit more of a unique experience, and that it comes back to that point, up until recently there wasn't a single brand on there. So the consumer market is massively changing, and I think we just have to adapt to that as hoteliers, and we do offer a different product and a different service to Airbnb, and I think we've got to run our own race.
Okay. Right, well, I'm just conscious of time, so one of the main ways that a hotel can stand apart, clearly from an alternative like Airbnb, is service, whether that's underpinned by technology, people, or a bit of both.
That's not to say, of course, that hotels have got it nailed. By no means are we getting this right consistently. And as we've been saying, consumer expectations of service evolve over time.
The biggest threats I see to the hotel industry is the lack of training with staff. When you get bad service, you definitely won't go back to that hotel again.
How could you look after me as a guest? Very frequently I've booked into certain country house hotels in the UK, and I find over a weekend that there's a wedding going on, and the wedding disrupts my use of the facilities. I might have to wait longer to get an evening meal. I might not be able to go into certain parts of the hotel. I might not be able to go to bed till midnight once the dancing and the music has stopped. So how do you look after non-wedding guests?
One question I would have is if you train your staff the same way across the world, why is it in some places they're not very friendly and not very helpful, some places they are? Is it about the management of the hotel, and some places people are happier than others? Surely there's some sort of consistent standards if you're a big brand across the world.
Looking at the check-in process, you've got two types of people. The older people, like myself, the older person, and the youngsters who are quite happy with technology and faceless interaction. How are you going to address this issue for people of my generation so they feel welcome?
And good service is no longer the exclusive domain of hotels.
My experiences at Airbnbs have been so pleasant, and that mostly has to deal with the people that were involved, the hosts, who really not only made sure that the home or the apartment that we stayed in was amazing, but that our entire experience in that city, that town, wherever we were, was top-notch. They offered suggestions on what to do, where to eat, and they really made sure they knew who their guest was so that they can cater towards them, and not just how sometimes I feel hotels, it's just really generic. Everybody gets the same thing unless you're paying really big amounts of money for your suites and really high-end rooms.
So with labour costs likely to rise, plus people's patience and willingness to wait declining, the emergence of technology and the ongoing professionalisation of the homestay sector, how can service remain an effective driver of value for hotels? Rob, please can we start with you?
Sure. James, you've heard this story. I think the technology is a great enabler, and it has the ability to, I think Leo used the words this morning, amplify. And there are ways of implementing technologies that can really mitigate heavily against big costs, but it should never be the substitute for great service. And the story that I'm talking about is the number one restaurant in Lisbon is a guy that's out about 2 miles out of town in a pretty dodgy street. He has the chairs kind of rattle a little bit, the table doesn't wobbles a bit. He has a square box 14-inch television in the corner of the restaurant, black and white, but he's the number one hotel on TripAdvisor. So technology is the great enabler that makes him profitable and gives him a lot of business. But what's amazing about that place is when you go there and you sit down, there's only 5 tables. You'll be friends with every other table by the end of the night, and he'll sit down and drink grappa with you at the end of the night. I don't know if he's going to live very long, but it's an incredible experience, and that's the only reason. He is a Casio for an EPOS system. He doesn't have the greatest EPOS. He doesn't have an amazing TV, but it's the great experience that's provided that you go back for and why he's number one in Lisbon. And it's technologies that is the enabler.
So, Serena, we're hearing technology as an enabler, and I don't think you used the word, but we heard it earlier, community. Is that something that you need to do in an independent hotel, that you can do with your guests? How do you attack it?
I think it is. There are all sorts of ways that we can enhance a guest stay by using it. But at the same time, it's really important because people do still want to have touches of service during their stay. And we're doing a lot to try and really understand our guest's journey and to work through it to gather as much information from them so that we can clearly understand at what points they do want our service input and when they don't. So perhaps they want to check themselves in, but they'd like a free drink at the bar, or there are all sorts of opportunities where service can still add value. And we have to, like the gentleman there, he said, how can you deal with my children's generation that don't want to be able to check themselves in, but you're still going to welcome me? And that's really coming to understand your customer. We're working so that everybody throughout our hotel, even they could be working in the housekeeping, cleaning, but they should be able to speak to our customers and understand why they're there, what they want in their rooms. We're trying to encourage all of our team to gather information because this is our best way of understanding what they really want.
Nicholas, with all the different brands you work with, how do you how do you keep a consistent approach? Do you take the best bits from one and take it to the other, or do you have to draw very clear lines between them?
Yeah, I mean, clearly we do draw clear lines between the brands and the specifics, or the issues that are brand specific, but clearly we also have that advantage of being able to see right across the spectrum, so can take the best of everything where we can implement it into the different hotels. I think the whole point of the point we're talking about with regards to service, it's critical. We operate a number of full service and limited service, and I always get very frustrated by the expression limited service, because actually it's not. It's limited facilities, but not necessarily limited service. And in fact, the person who is working behind the reception desk of a Holiday Inn Express or a Hampton by Hilton, that person then going and serving behind the bar, then going and serving you your meal in the restaurant, that person actually exemplifies service, and it's critical. And I think Rob is right. The technology is an enabler, but us having, as hoteliers, the ability to train, recruit, train, which we all know is an enormous challenge for us on a daily basis, but recruit and train people to work in the hotels and offer that level of service, irrespective of whether it's a budget hotel or whether it's your 5-star deluxe, is critical to the success of the hotels.
And on the specific issue of technology, a point that was made this morning is that too much of the investment we make in technology is actually superfluous from the consumer point of view and can easily become obsolete quite quickly as well. How would we respond to the point that was made this morning on that?
Personally, I would agree. I think, I've stayed in many hotels where you'll have iPads or tablets of some kind in rooms that either don't work or it takes a degree in nuclear physics as to how to work them out. And I think that actually good quality, cleanliness, good service, good quality food, that's actually where the investment should be made. And I know we're going to talk in a little bit about quality of product, but technology, I think, in terms of particularly the consumer-facing technology, should be a long, long way down the list so far as investment is concerned.
I would agree. I would say, I think service, it's hard to disagree with what's been said by the other members of the panel, and I think service remains fundamental to what we do. I do, however, think that service is changing and it's becoming less transactional. We're trialing facial recognition check-in in China at the moment with Alibaba, and I think that's a sign of the way that interaction is becoming less transactional, but I think it's becoming more high touch. And to the guy's point, he wants authentic restaurant recommendations in the local area. That's the thing that we need to be focused more on, rather than the more transactional side of service, which we've seen more of in the past.
And to the point that Nicholas made about product, the bedroom itself remains key. It is, after all, the key tangible in most cases, and unsurprisingly, it also generates plenty of opinions. We asked what was most important when it comes to the bedroom.
It's the facilities and the cleanliness.
I particularly prefer showers. I really don't care if I don't have a bath. For me, the bathroom's got to be really spotlessly clean. Otherwise, and I really hate really old bathrooms where the grouting's not fixed or things are just left unfinished. I don't need a fancy bathroom so long as it's clean, looks fairly newish, and just has the things I just need in it. And then that's one of the things that is important for me. It's more important to have a nice bathroom than a room. That is more important to me.
My worst experience in a hotel was discovering human hairs in the bed so that I knew that the sheets hadn't been changed.
Cleanliness is something that cannot be overestimated. Rooms are generally clean and up to a great standard, but it's the common areas and places that are not always paid attention to.
Actually, for sleeping, I don't really care about how big the room actually, but the important thing is for me is about toilet. Nice toilet is important for me, and then afterward, I think breakfast. I don't care breakfast actually because I just need bananas and honey in the morning.
Okay, so there we are, a nice toilet, and then afterwards, a breakfast of bananas and honey. I mean, I'll be honest, that's just your average morning in parts of Northampton. What, though, did our guests want to ask the panel?
frustrates me most about hotel rooms is, my question would be, has anyone in management ever stayed in one of their own rooms? Because sometimes they're just so impractically laid out. You think someone's not thought about this. You know, the lighting, I know people always moan about the lighting, but generally the lighting is really bad in hotels. It's just not logical often. And actually another thing that really annoys me is when you don't have blackout curtains and you can't get to sleep. Thin walls annoy me, noisy doors that slam. I think those are some of the top ones.
So now, correct me if I'm wrong, but to my knowledge, no group has yet patented a room that has an impractical layout, bad lighting, poor curtains and doors that slam. Clearly, that's a missed opportunity.
Now, we all know that our panellists will have spent many a night in rooms in their hotels. So I'm going to invoke the moderator's privilege and just refine the question and ask if any of our panel have ever had to stay a night in the worst room in their hotel. And if so, what do they then do about it the next day? Let's start with you, Nicholas.
Absolutely not. Oh, sorry. No, yes, I have stayed in the worst room in the hotels. And I have to say it's hard not to sympathize and empathize with many of the comments that the customers came up with. Lighting, I think, is a particular issue in hotels. It's a bit like one of those fairground games I find sometimes. You know, the one with a mallet and things pop up and you have to hit one and then something else pops up and you have to hit another. It's a bit like that very often with hotel lighting systems. You turn one off, or what you think has turned it off, but actually that means another light goes on in another corner, and then you turn that one off and then something else goes on, and it just drives you insane. So no, I sympathize, I empathize. I think in terms of modern build hotels, again, if you look at all of the brands, the modern rooms that are being designed and built are, I think, outstanding. And generally, in those hotels, you don't have the issues. The problem comes more where there are older hotels and conversions, and I get that. And I think it's really important, as hoteliers, to make sure that you do stay in your rooms and you do experience them. I remember in a previous life where we were refurbishing a lot of hotels, and in fact, we gave this project to 3 different designers. And we said, here you go, here's a room, do your best. So we had 3 completely different rooms designed. We then went through the whole rigmarole of getting customers, housekeepers, everybody staying in these various hotels for about a month to actually find out what the feedback was. And from that, we designed a really, really good room. And in fact, having stayed in other hotels which are owned by other franchisees, I see that model has been plagiarized completely.
Rob, naming no names.
Rob, let's come to you. You have a few older hotels, should we say, in your portfolio, and a slightly different dynamic there as well, being a membership organisation. So how would you tackle this point?
I think the beauty of the Best Western brand is that the key count's quite small, and a lot of them are independent hoteliers where the owner is in the hotel. So quite often, I find them probably more practical than some of the other hotels that I've stayed at in a city centre branded hotels. But for me, the ultimate test is, for me, I kind of don't notice it too much. But I take my other half along and she's like, there's nowhere to do my makeup, or there's no full-length mirror, and she spots things much greater than I do. So, so I'm not sure if that answers the question, but I wonder if designers sometimes are always men.
And Serena, as an independent, how far can you get detailed consumer input to your product?
By staying in the room myself? Oh, I stay regularly in and try to stay in a different room each time, and tend to come away with a list of things that I think we must do this and we must do that, and it definitely informs our strategy and has informed our strategy over the time. And in fact, I think I can chart the progress of the business from the early days, and it's like, oh my God, there's no hot water in the room, to, you know, I don't like those tea bags quite so much. You know, it's slowly as time has come on, the level of things that I don't like about the room so much has changed, and the goal is, the dream is that one of these days we won't be able to find anything to find fault with.
Okay. Our final question is quite an interesting one, and it comes from Raf.
If I were to ask a question to a hotel manager or whatnot, what I would ask is, I don't know, what peeves them most when it comes to their clients. I mean, I understand that there are certain messes that we leave behind, and I would like to know what, well, we do that we should avoid as patrons of the services.
Okay. So, please, can you each tell us the thing that most peeves you about your clients? We want to get onto some Slido questions after that, so please keep it short, preferably 1 point at a time. Let's start with Serena, please.
I think hearing about problems with a stay when it's too late to do anything about it. There was no iron in the room, and they maybe just didn't find it, or, you know, the things that we can't put right after they've gone. I think that's the most frustrating thing.
Is it not beholden on us to make them comfortable to come forward with that, though? We're not very good Brits at complaining.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, because he said, you know, what's the most annoying, or what peeves us most about our customers, and nearly everything that you think about, it actually comes back to, you know, I thought about, well, is it when they say there's no lift in the building, because we advertise everywhere that there's no lift, but if they still haven't noticed that there's no lift in our building, well, it's still our fault, because we haven't found a way of communicating that. So I think it is, you know, each one is really a challenge for us to find.
Okay, thank you. Rob?
I think I get the pleasure weekly of someone finding the CEO of Best Western to write a letter to, and I think the one that, we love all our customers, of course, but the one that probably tests my patience the most is the one that leverages TripAdvisor and Booking.com reviews to try and get something for free. I haven't written a review yet, but if you give me something for free, I won't. So I think when that becomes a yardstick or a threat, that's quite frustrating.
So how would you have responded to that famous case of the blogger who wanted a freebie in exchange for exposure?
That's not too dissimilar, I guess, is it? So it draws on your patience.
Okay, thank you. Tim?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we're in the hospitality business. We're in the business of providing amazing service and memorable experiences. I'm not a GM. And I would probably advise anybody that was considering being a GM as a career choice, maybe to choose something else if they're going to be irritated by hotel guests. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Nicholas?
I was a GM for 15 years. Anyway, I think that...
And then you chose something else.
I chose something else, yeah. I think customers who use us as an excuse for something that actually wasn't our fault. We had a recent incident where GDPR was actually the cause of the particular challenge. And a lady and her husband had stayed in the hotel. The husband had rung the next day, had emailed the next day, can you please send me a copy of the bill? The bill was duly sent. About 3 days later, we had a very, very irate woman saying, why did you send the copy of the bill to my husband? And we said, well, because he asked us to. Well, I'm afraid you've broken GDPR regulations, and I'm going to report you to the ICO because you have given out my data. Well, we've given your data to your husband. It turns out it wasn't her husband that she was in the room with that night. She's not very good at this because she used her email address and she also paid by credit card, so she wasn't very good at what she was doing, but using the threat of the ICO, which is a bit like the threat of a TripAdvisor, that we had caused problems, and we then had to fabricate, or she wanted us to fabricate a story on her behalf because she said her marriage was under distress.
Right. There you go, customers for you.
Shall we go to the app? Let's see if there's any questions on Slido that we want to have a look at. I can't see that, heavens. Question for Nick. As you operate both brands and independent hotels, what's the best option for customers?
For our customers? I don't think there's a clean answer that I would say it's definitely brand or it's definitely independent. I think for our customers, actually, the quality of the product, the right product in the right place, I think is crucial. So making sure that if whatever the market is, that you have the right product in that right place. I think there are many hotels where a brand is not necessary, and actually you are better off as an owner having an independent hotel rather than a branded hotel because the brand is not necessary. And you could argue that, I think, in central London, potentially, as one market where you need not actually have a brand because the market is so strong. But I think it's actually making sure that you deliver on your promise to the customers. I think that's the key thing, whether it's independent or whether it's branded.
I think we've probably got a good one here for Serena to tackle. what's the best way to get your independent hotel to compete in the digital space alongside core brands and intermediaries?
I think that we can learn lessons from the intermediaries, from the OTAs, for instance. So making sure that our website is really slick and efficient, counting the number of clicks to book for an OTA versus booking online. So there are lots of tricks that we can learn from them. And I think if we want to get people to book direct, then we have to give them that kind of service. I think the other thing that we can do probably better is getting the social side going. We are independent, we are different, we have got lots to talk about, so we can get that discussion going. And as we mentioned before, that word of mouth is extremely powerful.
Okay. And one more, I would like to ask that one that's showing red, mainly because my eye has been drawn to it by the colour. I don't know if that's you guys at the back. The best hotel you've stayed in and why. You can't mention your own. Very quickly, Tim.
Claridge's first night of my honeymoon.
Excellent, and I hope your wife would give the same answer. Serena.
Oh, come back to me.
Okay, Rob.
It is an ex-hotel, so but it's not now. Malmaison Oxford, no doubt. Amazing.
Nicholas.
Taj Hotel Mumbai. Service was extraordinary.
Okay. And Serena, are you ready?
It's on the fence.
Yeah, still on the fence. I still really like that very personal kind of small environment. So I think that it would be a place that I stayed in France. She had 2 rooms. It was very in the most beautiful spot ever. Wonderful view, completely unbranded, completely unique experience. That would be.
Well, I'm afraid that's all we have time for, folks. While we may be in Manchester, there's no ban here on putting your jazz hands together. So please join me in thanking our panel, Tim, Serena, Rob, and Nicholas.
Well done. Thank you. Well done.
If you want to come and talk to the two of us, you can find us out there on the Sky Bridge. But for now, we'll leave you with one closing, I think, inspiring thought from Cameron.
My final message to hoteliers would be treat everyone as if they were your family or your best friend. Whenever we go places that are not our home, we want to feel comfortable and we want to return. So if hotels really make sure that their guests feel really paid attention to and taken care of, I think you'll have a lot more people coming back to hotels.
On that note, thank you very much, everyone.